Well, Australia may soon have powers to slap heavy sanctions and travel bans on foreign individuals involved in human rights abuses. A parliamentary committee, this is at a federal level, has recommended the passage of a so-called Magnitsky Act, modelled off American legislation passed by the Obama administration following the mysterious death of Russian lawyer Sergei Magnitsky. Joining me now to discuss this and more, former Defence Minister, Liberal MP Kevin Andrews. Kevin, thank you for your time. This is very important. I know we talked about it a little bit last year, but events have moved along. You chaired an inquiry which is recommended to the Parliament that this is passed, this legislation. Tell us what happened to Sergei Magnitsky.
Sergei Magnitsky was employed by a financier, Bill Browder, to look into and investigate in Russia essentially fraud by Russian tax officials of something like $240 million that went missing. What he discovered was that there was fraud on the part of the tax officials. A consequence of that was that he was charged, jailed, and eventually tortured and died in jail for having exposed this corruption on the part of the Russians. Then Bill Browder campaigned around the world to introduce legislation to be able to sanction these types of officials. This was taken up in the US by Senators Benjamin Cardin and the late John McCain, and eventually the US passed legislation.
All right, we've already got an autonomous sanctions regime, which I know you'd be across. We obviously apply or help to apply UN Security Council sanctions. So help me understand, or help my viewers understand, why you think we need our own Magnitsky Act here in Australia. Why is it warranted?
Well, it's like comparing a car from the 1950s to a modern model. The autonomous sanctions legislation is quite limited in the way in which it can be applied. It tends not to be applied by Australia at all. It applies generally to countries rather than individuals. So the Magnitsky type legislation is much more precise and can go after those individuals who are involved in human rights abuses and corruption.
So from your deliberations as a committee, you seem quite confident, do you, that this will be something the PM progresses and may well have bipartisan support of the Parliament?
Well, from chairing the Foreign Relations Policy Committee, Peter, and from discussions with the Foreign Minister and indeed the Prime Minister, I'm reasonably confident that having given the committee the reference to look into this, there's an appetite on the part of the government to actually enact legislation. But there are three other reasons why I'm confident. First, we could find almost nobody of significance who opposed this type of legislation. Secondly, I cannot think of any member of the federal parliament, regardless of their political persuasion, who would vote against this legislation. And thirdly, we've done most of the work for the government because Jeffrey Robertson QC generously accepted an invitation from me to draft a bill. Now, obviously the government can change that bill around, but essentially 80% of the government's work has been done.
Yeah, well, this is the stuff I like to see us just do if we can get it through the Parliament, if it's bipartisan. This is why committees matter. Well done on that inquiry. I want to go, you've written recently about Xi Jinping. He's put a book out. I don't suppose he's written it, but his name's on the title. And it's all about how he sees governance in China. He made some pretty strong comments at Davos that the strong should not bully the weak. Now, aside from the hypocrisy and all of that, Kevin, where are things headed in this sort of pretty turbulent times we have between Australia and China? You're a former Defence Minister. Where can we make some ground, at least in an economic sense, but maintain our strong views on our sovereignty and our region?
Well, we have to be clear-eyed about China. Under Xi Jinping, China has become more internally repressive and more externally regressive. That's a fact of life. You see in China, surveillance of citizens, censorship of the internet. You see this repression against not only the million or so Uyghurs in re-education camps, but anybody of any other religious faith, whether it's a Buddhist or a Christian or who else. You've seen the crackdown in Hong Kong. So we have to be realistic about China. And I think one of the silver linings, if you like, of COVID was that most Australians these days have taken the blinkers off their eyes about Xi Jinping's totalitarian regime. That's the first thing. The second is, yes, we continue to trade, but we do it on our terms as well. We shouldn't have our sovereignty impinged upon by what China thinks in relation to the world. And that means also that we need to diversify our exports, not simply put all our eggs in the Chinese basket.
All right. Thank you for your time, Kevin.
Pleasure.
We're not going to stop talking about China all year. Look forward to catching up again soon.
Thank you.
All right, there you go. I tell you what, when they go to write the book about submarines, it won't be Kevin Andrews that's wearing the blame for the French subs. Never supported them at the time when he was Defence Minister, but plenty to say on subs this year, I can tell you.